think we can go through the demos that I put together. Michael, do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes, sir, you do.
Okay, let me do that. And we have till 2:35 Eastern.
Sure, feel
Is
free to
that
go a
correct?
little longer. Feel free to go a little longer if you need to.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Switch these around. Bear with me. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. If you can't, Michael, please let me know.
Nope, you're good to go.
Okay, so we wanted to talk about accelerating FHIR with attachments. So the original name of the webinar was Accelerating the FHIR with 275s, but we recently changed that because we wanted to broaden the scope of the presentation and not only talk about attachments, but how we can also do those using FHIR. So that's going to be the main focus of our demo today. And given that we started late, I'll go through some of the stuff fairly quickly. So my name is Jim Taylor. I am a senior manager at TIBCO. I am responsible for the TIBCO Foresight product offering, and that includes our healthcare products as well as our FHIR products. And I will skip through this. So here's what I have on the agenda. So I wanted to talk about the healthcare record exchange. If you've been following the Da Vinci work group, you know that the new name is now HREX, which I think was the original name for exchanging health records and clinical documents. At one point it was CDEX, but it has recently gone back to HREX. So I want to show how you can use the TIBCO BusinessWorks tool to add FHIR to an existing EDI claims processing workflow to retrieve claims. I also want to talk about how you can use the BusinessWorks tool to retrieve clinical documents from your partner's FHIR server, or how you can, and also how you can set up a workflow to allow your partners to push clinical documents to your environment. And if we do have any time at the end, we can go through Q&A. Right, so just to reiterate here, we're going to show you a workflow that processes claims, you know, the type of processes that you currently have in-house in most cases, that validates claims and then extracts critical pieces of information out of the claims transaction set that would help you determine whether a clinical document is going to be required to adjudicate the claim or for some other reason. And if so, the workflow will automatically build the FHIR request document and submit that to your partner. So let me show you how that's done. So if you're not familiar with BusinessWorks, it is our flagship integration tool, and what you're seeing now is the Studio product, and it's used to build the processes and applications that are eventually deployed in your production environment. So I'm going to use this tool to demonstrate how this would work. So again, here are all the EDI pieces that have been in place in most environments for quite some time. So we've added some additional components here as I said before, to extract information out of the claim, determine whether an attachment is going to be required or not, and then go through the steps to submit the request to your partner. So let me show you how that will work. Okay, so I have launched the process, and it's going to pick up an 837 transaction set that contains one claim. And in this demo, we're taking a look at the diagnosis codes to make the determination on whether a clinical document is going to be required or not. And I've set it up so that it will reach out to a FHIR server and retrieve a clinical document. So it's going through the initial setup steps. And the first thing it'll do is pick up the 837 from a folder. And there's the 837, and goes through all the normal steps for processing 837 validation and generating acknowledgments. And then you can see here it has created a communication request FHIR resource, right? So that's the resource that's used to submit a request in an asynchronous fashion to your partner to request a clinical document. So the request has been submitted to the FHIR server. It is now up to your partner to digest that request, find the clinical document, put that into a FHIR communication resource or document reference resource, and make that available on the FHIR server. And we as a payer will go out later and then retrieve that. So I'm going to check the FHIR server to make sure that our communication request was received. And I happen to be using the Happy public server. If you're not familiar with this, this is the interface into the FHIR server. And again, this is based on the Happy FHIR server, which has become the a de facto standard in the industry. So I want to check for that communication resource that I just created. I'm sorry, communication request resource. And I believe that's it. So here's the document that the workflow created and then submitted. So we're asking the provider to provide a care plan for a specific patient, and then we have some other additional identifying information. So that's the first step. The second step is once that clinical document becomes available, then we can go out and retrieve it. So I've set up a separate workflow for that. So again, we're using FHIR to retrieve that communication document that our partner created. And in this case, that communication document refers to a FHIR document reference resource. And the reason for doing that is that a document reference FHIR resource contains metadata that's consistent with some of the document management standards and specifications. And I've also shown in this workflow how you can distribute that clinical document let's say that you're supporting CMS, you're a MAC and you're supporting CMS, and you've hired a review contractor to review your claims. You can use this workflow to send the clinical document to your review contractor. So let me start this. And I did cheat, and I did configure this ahead of time to pick up a communication resource that already existed on that FHIR server. But it'll be a care plan in a CCDA document. And I've used the example that was created by the DaVinci folks. So fairly soon we'll be able to see that document. So the first activity, the read communication activity, is submitting a GET request. Submitting a GET request, and apparently there's something wrong with the request. But let's let this go through. I see what happens. It's actually doing both of them. But at any rate, the end result of that second workflow is that we've retrieved the clinical document, saved it to a folder, and we've also delivered it to a review contractor. So let me show you what that is. So there it is, 1015 at 227. Again, it's a CDA care plan. And here's what it looks like. So let's say that we're a payer and we're proactively monitoring our patients, and they've shown up or they've delivered a claim for a fairly serious condition that probably should have been caught earlier if the patient had followed the care plan. So the payer may want to investigate that further, and the first thing they'll need to do is to retrieve the care plan. So that's what we've demonstrated here. Then you can take this document, put it into a CDA viewer, which shows it in a nice format, or incorporate it into your clinical document management application. So let me show you the last method. And this is called, well, it's now called the HRX push method. So in this case, the provider has created a clinical document, knows that the payer needs that clinical document. So instead of waiting for a request from the payer, they're going to automatically push that clinical document to the payer. So they can do it in a couple of different ways. They may send that directly to a FHIR server, or they could set up a workflow with an HTTP listener that will receive that request, and then do the same things that we've done before, which is to save the clinical document to disk and then send that off to the review contractor. So I'm going to start this. This is a two-step process. So this will start the workflow, and I'm going to use Postman as a tool to send the request. Bear with me, it takes a minute or two to load. So I'm going to simulate what a provider would do. They probably have their own tool for submitting a request. Still loading. Okay, so I've set up a communication document, and this is the communication FHIR resource, and it contains an attachment that's been encrypted in base 64. So I'm going to submit this to our workflow. It's listening on port 7788. And it has received the request. It's validating the FHIR resource. And by the way, there are a number of different ways that we can validate FHIR resources using the structure definition or schemas. So the workflow is completed, and we now have a new clinical document. And in this case, it's a blood test, and it's a PDF file. And this has been de-identified. So there's a clinical document. And again, you can add that to your clinical document management application or add that to any relevant application. So you can see how fairly quickly you can retrieve a clinical document from your partners, which is certainly a big improvement, I think, over the current process, which can be very time-consuming and manual. So I see that we're getting short on time, and I've gone through each of the workflows. So just to review, I've shown how you can add FHIR to an existing EDI claims processing workflow to retrieve clinical documents and remove that burden from your internal staff. We've seen how we can retrieve a clinical document by pulling a FHIR server, and then once that document becomes available, we'll automatically retrieve that and then process that in any way that makes sense for you. And we've also seen how you can set up a workflow to allow a trading partner to push clinical documents to you. Now, I haven't shown any of the security features yet because I wanted to keep this simple, but clearly you would need to have security included in all of the workflows, and that would be based on the OAuth 2 standard. So let me pause there. Michael, I don't know if we have any questions or not.
If there are any questions, please feel free to include them in the chat function on your toolbar. Click chat, and you can send a question through the chat directly, and we'll read it off.
No questions so far. By the way, I did want to mention, I know that the main topic for these webinars is the 275 with attachments. And I want to mention that we do support that. We do have tools that are, can process 275 to extract attachments and to add an attachment to a 275. And if anybody is interested in talking about those products, please let me know. Michael, by the way, is my email address posted anywhere?
I'm not sure, but we do have a question in the chat room from Sonia asking, is there an implementation guide for the FHIR attachment?
So there are implementation guides. The main FHIR resource that's used for attachments is the communication resource. The attachment can be embedded directly into that resource, or it can be embedded into the document reference FHIR resource. And there are some groups out there that are creating implementation guides for specific use cases. So there's an implementation guide for the DaVinci Health Record Exchange, and that's available on the DaVinci Confluence page. Hopefully that answered your question.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any additional questions for Jim? All right, looks like you've answered all questions, Jim, with this fantastic presentation. Any closing remarks?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to know if you had any closing remarks. Oh, wait, there's an additional question in the chat room. Do you have the link to the implementation guide?
Yes. I can show you. Well, I can put that in the chat.
Sure, that'd be great.
Let me do that. And I think this does require a login. So here are all the DaVinci use cases. Here is the health record exchange. Then there's a list of all the supporting materials, including the FHIR implementation guide. So I will copy this and put it into the chat. So you should be able to see it in the chat now.
Perfect, and I will send it to everyone. There we go. Okay. All right. You're welcome.
Well, if there are no other questions, then again, I want to apologize for being late. There was a scheduling or mix-up. It's entirely my fault. So I apologize for that. Hopefully I was able to explain enough about our tools. And if you are intrigued and want to talk more about it, you can contact me at this email address. I can pull it up. So jataylor@tipco.com, or you can contact Beth Spears, who's one of our system engineers, who's on the call, and her email address is bspears@tipco.com. Well, thanks again, everybody, for allowing us to talk about our FHIR and attachment tools. I hope this was informative and helpful, so I really appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jim. And this concludes the demos and the sessions for today. Just a reminder that our attachments workshop starts at 11 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow, which is Friday. A final document with all the access links will be sent out to everyone who's registered on weedy.org. So thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your day.